All right, well, everyone, holding by the Book of Leviticus Chapter 18. Again, one, holding by the Book of Leviticus Chapter 18. It's good to be back after all the holidays, and hopefully whoever celebrated enjoyed. So again, everyone, holding by the Book of Leviticus Chapter 18. We're in verse 3. Still in verse 3. And the Torah says, Kamaisa Eretz Mitzrayim, Shavtem ba lo tasu Kamaisa Eretz Kenan, Shani Meviaschem, Shama lo tasu b'chol lo selech. So here the Torah says, very clear, that after the deeds of the land of Egypt, where you're going to live, you shall not go after the deeds of the land of Canaan, where I'm going to bring you. You shall not do, neither you shall walk in their ordinances, right? So Rashi said that the deeds of the Egyptians, Canaanites, were worse than everybody else, so don't go in their actions. Also talking about don't go, don't, what do you call it? Don't go according to social customs. Don't go to the theaters. Don't go to the racehorses, right? We spoke quite a bit about that, and we were working our way to the Kliyakar, where the Kliyakar had asked the question that Rashi here says, don't go after the ways of the Egyptians and the Canaanites, i.e., because they're worse, right? They're worse than everyone else. Very good. So then he says, then the Kliyakar asks, very good. If that's true, then the other nations I could go according to their laws, right? So he said, obviously Rashi, cannot mean that, and we spoke about that, and we started to speak about last week or a few weeks back. We spoke about the fact that Jewish people, it says, don't go according to the ways of the Canaanites, seemingly, or the Egyptians as well, because Jewish people didn't want to leave, right? So we sort of flushed out that idea. How could it be Jewish people didn't want to leave? But here again, the Kliyakar over here says that that the Jewish people seem to despise, do not want to go to the land, not wanting to go to the land that God promised them. Our forefathers, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and God had to bring them and to force them, right? Had to force them in the land, right? Again, not so easy to understand. Not so easy to understand as they are getting, severely punished in Egypt and spiritually almost falling off the face of the map. That's why it says, don't go after the ways of the Canaanites because of what they did. And what was the fact that I brought you there? Right? I brought you there by force in order to live there. But for whatever reason, they didn't want to leave, right? Because Torah says in the book of Exodus chapter 16, verse 3, it's what you brought us to die in the desert, right? You took us out of Egypt to die in the desert, and by the spies, right? By the spies, it says, book of Numbers, chapter 14, verse 4, you brought us there, and we want to go back to Egypt, right? We want to return to Egypt. So too, the Medrash says, the women wanted to go to the land. They very much wanted to go to the land of Israel. The men didn't want. The men hated the land. Right? That's what he's saying over here. The men seemingly hated the land. And therefore, what did God have to do? God had to take them around China, no pun intended. He had to take them around the desert. Take them around the desert in order to get, after they crossed the sea, it takes them a roundabout way, so they won't go back to Egypt. Right? So they won't go back to Egypt. And he says, and for all this is proof that they didn't want to go to the land. They didn't want to go to the land, the holy land that God promised them. from the time of their forefathers, Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and do all the mitzvahs that are dependent on the land, right? There are a lot of mitzvahs that we have the ability to do because we live in the land. Now, obviously, there's many we can't do because we don't have a temple, we don't have a base of mikdash. That's true. Nonetheless, there are plenty of mitzvahs that we can't do. There are more mitzvahs that we can't do in the land. That is for sure. But nonetheless, God has to bring them against their will. He has to bring them against their will. And he carries them on the wings, like on the wings of eagles, so to speak. And he takes them there against their will. And he brings them in a way, brings them in this roundabout way, says the Kliyakar, he brings them in this way so they won't return. Yeah, they won't have the ability to return until they're going to want to come with their own will. And keep God's Torah. The whole point of coming out of Egypt, why does God take Jewish people out of Egypt? To make them holy. To make them a holy nation. Now, making them a holy nation, what does that mean? Making them a holy nation means to keep Torah mitzvahs. That's what it means. To keep all the mitzvahs. Yeah? So really, you can only keep all the mitzvahs in the land of Israel. Right? Because many things are dependent on the land of Israel. That's why some people say you only have to keep the commandments outside of Israel. Right? But in the land, who says we have to keep them? Right? It's a big mistake. The fact that we do have the land, they're going to say, well, even though we're in the land, I can eat falafel, I can do other things. But who says I have to keep the mitzvahs? Right? It's much easier to marry someone Jewish here in the land than certainly anywhere else. And you got the biggest, Jewish community in the world here in the land of Israel. Very good. But again, there are issues. You have, unfortunately, you have many Jewish women that married Arab men, now are in Arab countries, right? Kind of stuck there. Getting abused there, whatever. You have that problem. That's not a small problem. And then you have, a lot of foreign workers here from Romania, other places. So, you do have intermarriage. I'm not gonna say you don't have intermarriage, but it's not, not even close compared to what it is outside of Israel. 60% intermarriage, 70% intermarriage, some places 80% or higher. It doesn't really matter. Right? It doesn't really matter. But the whole thing over here is that finally they're going to come with their own will, with their own desire. But at the beginning, that was not the case. Right? So here the Kliyakar tells us that going after their ways, right? Going after their ways was so strong. And we spoke about this really at the beginning, a number of weeks ago, that their ways, the ways of our surroundings, right? Or let's say better, where we're located and what's around us has an effect, has a huge effect. Now, that being the case, it's one thing to say, I don't want to go to the land. Yeah. It's one thing to say, well, maybe it's going to be hard. Maybe, you're going to have a problem with the Arabs. You're going to have a problem, making a living. You're going to have a problem with other things. Okay. Right? Doesn't the Gemara say one of the three things that are hard to acquire is the land of Israel? Right? One is Torah, and one is Olam Haba. But one is to acquire the land. It's hard. Anyone from, outside of Israel will tell you it's hard. Anyone inside of Israel will also tell you it's hard. Yeah, there are many benefits that would offset the hardship. But okay. So if you want to tell me there's hardship, if you want to tell me, you got a lot of things you got to deal with that are not pleasant. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so you want to tell me there's hardship, I can understand. You want to tell me after what the Jewish people go through, you want to tell me, not only don't they want to go, but it's considered disgusting in their eyes to go. This is very hard to understand, right? This seemingly is impossible to understand. Yeah, the Jewish people, God takes, and we mentioned this before. God takes the Jewish people out early from Egypt. They're supposed to be there for 400 years. How many years are they there for? 210. They're there for 210 years. God has to pluck them out himself, take them out against their will, because otherwise they would have reached the 50th level of impurity. And by the time they live, if they would reach the 50th level of impurity, no Jewish people left. Right? There wouldn't be anybody left. So God has to take them out early. So what saved the Jewish people? They didn't change their clothing. They didn't change their names. They didn't change. And they kept bris milah, and they kept circumcision, and they kept Rosh Chodesh, kept the new month. They kept the calendar, let's say. So that's what saved them. I mean, you got the women. Obviously, it saved them as well. But you have to ask the question: if God put the Jewish people in certain places, and as the Kli Yakar says, how could Rashi say these people are worse? Their ways are worse, as if to say, well, the other nation's not so bad, so you can go after their ways, right? Obviously, you can't mean that, because that would also be forbidden. Yeah, but you have to ask the question, it's one thing not to want to go. It's one thing to complain what's there, or potentially there, right? Certainly by the spies, right? You got the spies where you're talking about great people here. And they say we're like grasshoppers in their eyes. And because of that, they complain. God says you're complaining for nothing. I can take care of these people, not a problem. So you're lacking certain level, you're lacking faith. So I'm going to give you something to cry about. Yeah, so Gemara says, what did God give them to cry about? Tisha B'Av. Fast the 9th of Av. So because of what they said, the future, we're going to have to pay for. Again, collective punishment. Serious punishment. Tremendous tragedies happen on Tisha B'Av. Right? Destruction of the first temple, the second temple. Jews get thrown out of Spain that time. World wars started on that day. I mean, a horrific day in Jewish history. So they complain. So they absolutely complain. Now, you can ask the question, why? But all these things come down to the same point. It's all the same thing. It's one thing to say it's hard. It's one thing to say, how are we going to overcome this? How am I going to overcome that? How am I going to overcome the other thing? It's another thing altogether to say, not only don't we want to go there, but the land is bad. Yeah. The land is disgusting. We don't, we hate going there. Why should we go there? That's a different level. Again, I can understand. There's hardship, there's difficulty. And that's why, thousands of Israelis every year leave the country for greener pasture. Yeah, they want more money. They don't have to deal with the Arabs. Yeah, a lot of things make it easy to go elsewhere. Okay. But people leave in droves. And that leads to assimilation. And that leads to intermarriage, right? Depending where they go. So I can understand there's hardship. There's plenty of hardship. All right, someone will say, but don't you always say it's the best place to be? Spiritually, yes. Strongest Jewish community in the world, nothing to talk about. Yeah, but there's a price. There's hardship. It's hard to acquire. It's a whole nother thing to say, not only don't we want to go, but the land is like disgusting in our eyes. That's a different level. It's a whole different level. Everyone would agree going to the land is hard. Okay. Not going to take that away. Right? It's hard. There's no question. Now, if you were born here, you know the system. You deal with the system. You're not born here. You got to know how to work the system. Yeah? You have to know how to fit in, what to do. Okay. Safe, disgusting. Say, I hate the land. Well, they don't necessarily know what they're getting into, so to speak. They know, going into the land, they're going to have to deal with these nations. And these nations look much more powerful than them. So you got to understand, they have fear. Right? That we can understand. So what happened to the faith? What happened to their emunah? This is the greatest generation in the history of man. They saw God face to face on Mount Sinai, whatever that means. They saw the miracles in Egypt. The ones who didn't want to come out of Egypt stayed there. They died. 80% of the Jewish people. Mind-boggling. So you have 2 to 3 million people came out. That means about 8 million people died there. Died there. But didn't God put them there in the first place? Doesn't God know the future? God knows past, present, future. That's why at the end of Parshas Bereishis we just read yesterday. Seemingly, God has regret. He created man. Right? The Rashi brings down the Medrash. Right? What does the Medrash say? Well, someone asked one of the rabbis, how could God have remorse? How could he have regret? He didn't know man could sin. Even though he's going to wipe out man, okay. Right? Except for Noah and his family. How can it be? God didn't know. Right? So, the rabbi tells him, he said, "Do you ever have a child?" Again, this question shouldn't even get off the ground. If God knows past, present, future, what do you do with that verse? Right? Obvious question. So the rabbi tells him, "Do you ever have a child?" He said, "Yeah." So he said, "What did you do when you had a child?" He said, he celebrated, passed out Cuban cigars. Right? Made a big party. Very good. The rabbi asked him, "But don't you know? Eventually that child's going to grow up. Child's going to get old and die." So the person says, "I'll be happy when I'm supposed to be happy. I.e., child's born, I'll be happy. But knowing the child is about to die, I'll be sad. I'll be sad if when child grows up, it'll die." So the rabbi tells them same thing by God. Be happy when we do the right thing. And be sad when we do the wrong thing, but when we do the wrong thing, there's payback. Right? There's reward and punishment. Very good. But God knows what he's doing. We may not understand. Okay. Many things we don't understand. Very good. God knows what he's doing. So in this case, is God going to make a mistake? Is he going to make a mistake? He ain't making a mistake. Right? He knows past, present, future. If he knows past, present, future, and he knows if he sticks the Jewish people into Egypt or wherever they're going to go, right? And the end result is he has to take them out against their will. And only 20% are going to come out. Why do it? Obvious question. Why in the world would you do it? You're setting up the people to fail. And by setting the people up to fail, what's going to happen? They'll disappear. Because the bottom line is, without Torah mitzvahs, you'll disappear. Jews will disappear. Yeah, the early Zionists, wanted to have a land of their own, made sense. So they're not being persecuted, okay. So Schwartzel got lucky. He wanted Uganda, Argentina. He got Israel. Very good. Right? So no one should ever read the Jewish state, which he wrote. But he wanted, his goal was a land of Jews. What does the land of Jews mean? It means Jewish in name only. Not keeping ancient mitzvahs, ancient things that don't make sense. I want to go on from that. I want to leave that. I want to be the new Israel. Very good. That's like having, that's like the meat without the potatoes over here. So you're missing the whole point. Because throughout Jewish history, what's kept the Jewish people together? Tell me, speak a different language? Okay. Possibly. But what's keeping them together? More than anything else, Torah and mitzvahs. Not just about a piece of land. But the piece of land is crucial according to the Torah. The first Rashi, mentioned this last night in Pirkei Avos, right? The first Rashi in Chumash. Bereshis bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. God created the heaven and the earth. Yeah, very good. Why did he create the heaven and the earth? Why did he create the heaven and the earth first? Right? So Rashi asked the question, name of Rabbi Yitzchok. Some say that was Rashi's father. Yeah. Why do we not start for the first mitzvah? Exodus chapter 12. Rosh Chodesh. Right? New month. Why don't you start with the first mitzvah? In order to teach one major thing. God's in charge. So the nation's going to come along and say, you stole our land. And what's the Jew going to say? What did we stole your land? Bereshis bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. God created the heaven and the earth. Very good. Yeah. They're going to like that answer? They're not going to like that answer. Not going to care about that answer. Right? So many say the answer is not for them. The answer is not for the non-Jews, for us. For us to be strong. God runs the world. He's in charge. If you don't want the Jews to be there, throw them out. Some other nation will come along. Been in exile for 2,000 years. Yeah? Kaufman's language. Trump don't want it. Trump don't get it. Very good. So we won't have it. For the payback. Okay. But God's the one in charge. He knows what he's doing. And he'll give the land to who he feels should have it. And not the Jews, it'll be someone else. Maybe the Jews will come back. Obviously, it's one of the jobs of the Messiah. Bring in the exiles. Bring the rest of the Jewish people back. Very good. 2,000 years we haven't had the land. So what did God say? You guys don't deserve it. And God had to destroy his own temple and left. Right? And he left this world. And we're living in a world of Hester, but don't Hester upon it. Living in a world of hiddenness within hiddenness. We don't know, I spoke a lot about this last night. Yeah. We don't know nothing from nothing what's going on. All of a sudden now, the day before, the most happiest day, one of the most happiest days of the year, and some Torah, hostages come out, the rest of the hostages come out. On that day, now again, you can desecrate Shabbos to save lives. That's not an issue. Right? And a lot of hostages came out on Shabbos. Okay, so what? You're allowed to, desecrate Shabbos to save lives. Whether, they should have done this, they shouldn't have done this, they had no choice, right? Without getting into politics, they had no choice. Okay. But what in the world's going on? If God knows, and we're going to assume this, right? We're going to make this, we're going to make this assumption here. God knows past, present, future, right? If God knows past, present, future, then he knows what he's doing. Yeah. So again, you want to tell me it's hard? I can understand. You want to tell me they despise it and God has to take them against their will? That's hard to understand. It's almost impossible to understand. Now, one answer, God puts them in Egypt. What's the answer? What's one answer? Where does Moshe Rabbeinu grow up? Moshe Rabbeinu gets saved by Batya or Bitya or whatever her name was. Bas Paro, daughter of Paro. Right, big miracle, arms stretched out, took the baby in. I mean, according to nature, shouldn't have happened. Kind of like Plastic Woman, or you know, remember Plastic Man back in the days, cartoons, whatever, right? So she reaches out, her arm extends, say, you know, sees the Jewish child, brings the Jewish child to the palace. Right under Pharaoh's nose. So Moshe Rabbeinu grows up in the palace of the king. Again, this is one explanation, right? There are multiple explanations here. But Moshe Rabbeinu grows up in the palace of the king. Of all places for Moshe Rabbeinu to grow up, right? And Pharaoh understood through his astrologers why he's going to drown every male, because the astrologers saw that the Jewish people are going to be saved, someone coming out of the sea. Why didn't he question this boy who his daughter brought? Right? Good question. Yeah. In either case, Moshe Rabbeinu grows up in the palace of the king. So according to this explanation, why? Why does God situate Moshe Rabbeinu right there? One answer is because Moshe Rabbeinu has to understand in this world what kingship is. He has to understand what a human king is in order to understand who the King of Kings is. In other words, we don't have the concept of kingship today. A king, you know, back in the day, maybe in some, maybe a place like Saudi Arabia, maybe, or maybe a few other places where, like, the one in charge has the right and has the ability to kill people, send people to death. You don't really have that too much today. I mean, pretty much disappeared. But what did God need to show Moshe Rabbeinu? God needed to show Moshe Rabbeinu one very simple thing. He had to show him, and he had to understand beyond the shadow of a doubt what true kingship is. And Pharaoh was like king of the world power. Made himself into an idol, into a god himself. That's why when God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, go to the river, tell Pharaoh to let my people go, why does he go to the river? Well, if you're a king, if you're a god, seemingly you have no bodily needs. Yeah, so why did he go to the river? Had to relieve himself, right? Well, keep this clean, right? Got to go to the bathroom, very good. So as he's doing what he's doing, Moshe Rabbeinu shows up. It's like, let my people go. Kind of embarrassing, if you think about it. Pretty embarrassing, but okay. So in order to understand who the King of Kings is, Moshe Rabbeinu has to see kingship front of his face. He has to grow up with it. It has to be in his bones. As bad and everything else that Pharaoh did, God had to show him what it is. Because once you understand the concept God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, once you understand what kingship is in this world, then you can give over to the Jewish people real kingship. And what's that real kingship? Me. God himself. Because there are a lot of things we learn out from kings. Person says it's Shmona Esrei. Yeah, I'm just going through some of these laws recently. Right? What do you do when you meet a king? You take steps forward. You take steps backwards when you leave a king. It's about kingship, how to approach a king. When you're asking for your needs, physically and spiritually. right? We're showing our credentials. We are the offspring of Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Because the person is going to ask for their needs, but they're not going to ask straight away. Say, can I have this? Can I have that? Can I have the other thing? God's going to say, who are you? Why should I even help you? But I got credentials. What's your credentials? Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov. Right? Those are my credentials. That's who I am. That's where I come from. A person's never going to ask, I want this, I want that, or the other thing, right? A person's going to say, right? A person's going to say like this. A person goes into a job interview. Now, one of the questions they'll ask potentially is, what do you want? What do you desire for a salary? Unless salary's fixed or whatever. But that's not going to be the first thing. What does the employer want to see? The employer wants to see, what do you bring to the table? What can you offer me? How can you help my company grow? Right? So people say, well, I'm good. Spiritually, I'm good. I don't need to work on anything. I'm good. That's like going into a job interview and saying I'm mediocre. Yeah. Can you multitask? Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay with that. Can you go through a Excel spreadsheet? Yeah. I can do it okay. Like you're not saying I'm mediocre. Why would they hire you? It's the kiss of death. What do you bring to the table? You don't bring anything to the table. So we pray the Shmoneh Esrei, silent meditation, whatever you want to call it. And you're asking for your needs. I need health. Yeah, I need livelihood. I need spiritual redemption. I need all these things. I need knowledge. Need spiritual knowledge. God's like, why should I give you all this? Because you're giving over your credentials. And what are those credentials? I'm a son of Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Oh, so all of a sudden God's going to say, okay, you're not going on your own credentials. Yeah. You're not doing the moonwalk on your own over here. Because you have no credentials. Thousands of years later, we don't come to the crust and the toenails of who these people were. We have no idea the greatness of who these people were. Not the prophets, not King David. We have no idea. We tried the best of our ability to understand, who they are. But that's our credentials. So you go into a job interview, you got to give credentials. Why should they hire you? They're asking, well, I need this. How's the dental program work? How's the health, how's the health insurance? How's this? How's that? They said, forget about all that. I didn't offer you the job yet. I didn't even lay anything out. Tell me why I should hire you. Give me a good reason why I should hire you. Those are our credentials. Yeah, that's where we come from. But to say we have our own, forget it. God would have wiped us out a long time ago. Long time ago. We have nothing to say. Even though there's more Torah being learned today than the time of the Second Temple, the quality's not even close. Back in the day, you had people that could bring people back from the dead, but the generation wasn't worthy. Anybody can do that today? Nobody. Any do that in previous generations? No. Maybe some had the ability. Maybe. But generation wasn't worthy, so it doesn't matter. People say, oh, the Rambam was medieval. Yeah. These other great rabbis, what do they know? What do they know? Let's talk about medicine for a second. The Rambam would always sign off. He was living in Egypt. And anytime he wrote a letter to somebody saying Moshe ben Maimon, that was who, his name was Moshe, the son of Maimon, right? It's an acronym for the Rambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon. And he said, the one who's stuck living in Egypt transgressing the Torah prohibition, but he's onus al pi dibur, right? He's under onus. Yeah. Why is he under onus? Why is it beyond him to leave? Because he was a doctor to the Sultan. When you're a doctor to the king, very hard to leave. Impossible to leave. So he's stuck there. But the Rambam understood, as medieval as he was, the Rambam understood, medicinal capability of plants. Now, there are people, holistic people today, they'll say they understand, you take this, you take that for different things. Not according to, accepted medical practice, let's say, right? Normative medical practice. And, say, take these herbs, that are, people say like the witch doctor. Yeah, but people will use them when all types of other medication don't work. Yeah, alternative medicine. Person, God forbid, let's say, has cancer. And they say, listen, we've done everything we can. We did chemotherapy, we did this, we did that. There's nothing more for us to do. Yeah? What will a person do in such a case? Either they'll give up, either they'll just give up, and they'll say, okay, what can I do? Right? It's only a matter of time before you die. Very depressing. Or, if they can, they'll try and do something alternatively. Right? They'll do something alternatively. Why? Well, if these other things don't work, maybe this will work. They'll throw their hat in the ring and say, okay, I'll try that. Right? What's the alternative? Death. Death is the alternative. Some people won't do it. Some people absolutely won't do it. They'll just say, okay, that's the divine decree. That's it. And finished. Right? Does a person, they have an obligation to go that far? They don't. They certainly don't. Right? But some people will go that route. Even something has been proven or not accepted by the FDA. It's kind of dangerous playing, you might be playing Russian roulette. Okay. We don't know if it really works, right? We think it might, and it should help. And we've seen in laboratory rats or whatever, it did something. So they give people it, to try it. Again, why would people do it? Because they're desperate. Because nothing else works, according to modern medicine. So if nothing else works, what do? You try anything else. Maybe you'll go to a witch doctor. Maybe you do other, I don't know, whatever it is. Right? Without, getting into all that. But you do what you can do. So Moshe Rabbeinu himself sees what kingship is. Now Moshe Rabbeinu, through all the divine commands that God gives him, and says, pass on to the Jewish people.
Hello. I'm assuming you can hear me. I think that he hit all of his outline points that he's going to hit for today.
Will you repeat that, Amy? You're breaking up.
I'm pretty sure that he's not going to come back online.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Okay,
welcome.
no worries.
One second here, just got knocked out. I don't know why. The electric issue. All right, one second here. Sorry about that. Some electricity issue here. Don't know exactly what happened, but let's whatever. Let's continue this. One second. Um. One second. Um.
We might need to invite other people back.
Yeah, one second. One second. All right, whatever. People contact me to contact me. One second. All right. I do apologize for that. Uh, all right. So as we were saying before we got interrupted here, the basic idea of of what happened. Essentially, Moshe Rabbeinu grows up in the palace of the king, right? That's what we're speaking about. Moshe Rabbeinu grows up in the palace of the king. And what does God want? God wants Moshe Rabbeinu to understand what happened, right? To understand, let's say better, to understand what it means to serve a king in this world. So what does God do? So God orchestrates it that Moshe Rabbeinu himself grows up in the palace of the king. Okay. Now, even with all that, right, and we explained this a number of times, even with all that, what do I have? What do I have? What I have over here is that even though Moshe Rabbeinu has to give over to the Jewish people what kingship is, right? Essentially, he has to give that over. He has to learn kingship in order that the Jewish people understand who the King of Kings is, right? Very good. So again, that I can understand, and therefore the Jewish people have to be in that place, or to be in a place to understand what kingship is. Good. Now, the only problem is that, as we see by the Meraglim, by the spies, what do the spies say? Right? What do the spies say? Yeah. The spies say, what are we doing here? We're going to die. Right? We're going to die in the desert. We're going to die in the desert. Why'd you bring us here? Right? That's what the Kli Yakar says. He says, we want to go back to Egypt. What are we doing here? Right? Exodus chapter 16, verse 3. You brought us to die in the desert. Better go back to Egypt. Egypt was any great sheikhs. They were suffering there like no tomorrow. They almost got obliterated spiritually. Very good. But to say they hated to go to the land? Yeah, again, hardship, I can understand. That I can sure understand. To say that's an impossibility? Yeah, we don't want it. Right? We certainly don't want it. We despise it. Right? We don't want to have any part of it. That's very hard to understand. That's extremely hard to understand. So what's simple explanation? Where are the Jewish people going? God gives the Torah. Right? God gives the Jewish people the Torah. Very good. Why is he giving the Torah? Keep mitzvahs. Yeah, that's why he gave the Torah. For us to do what we need to do. Very good. Where are they going? They're in the desert. What's in the desert? Dust. Sand. No oasis. But what does God give them? Man. Takes care of all their needs. Gives them the manna. Very good. Takes care of their needs. Whatever they thought the food was, that the manna was, that's what it tasted like. But they said, we missed the fish. We missed the watermelon. Like, you're going back to Auschwitz. What did you miss? What in the world is going on here? Simple answer is, what is God doing? God is flexing their emunah muscle. Oh, Mother Hubbard, ain't nothing in the cupboard. They finished the manna. Everyone gets what they need. There's no more food. What's going to be tomorrow? Don't know. What did they have yesterday? The man came. What did they have the day before? It came. What happened in the end? For years. It came. We got double portion every Friday. So what are they afraid of? Maybe they're afraid they're not on the level. And if they're not on the level, what's going to happen? They're in trouble. Then God will starve them. There's no food. What did God expect? What did God want from them? Had they flexed their emunah muscles the right way? I mean, again, this is very hard to understand, practically speaking. Because they came out of Egypt. 20% came out of Egypt. They saw the miracle. They saw God at Mount Sinai, whatever that means. Greatest generation in the history of man. They missed the fish? Really? Come on. Very hard to understand. Very, very hard to understand. Had they worked on their belief and faith in God properly, what would have happened? They would have gone straight into the land. Messiah would have come. That would have been it. But they complain. You see, by the Miraglim, by the spies. Let's go back to Egypt. Right? Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 4. Let's go back. It's kind of crazy. With grasshoppers in their eyes. God decimated the world power at that time. Took Egypt, made mincemeat out of Egypt. All the plagues. Totally above nature. Totally destroyed the entire country. Not only that, they took all the wealth out also. Demolished the world power in an unbelievable way. Very good. What are they missing here? How in the world did that go back to Egypt? They didn't think. Even if we look like grasshoppers in their eyes, they don't think God can take care of business. Didn't he take care of business in Egypt? Didn't he show all the miracles? They witnessed all the miracles. You ask the other way. If you witnessed all the miracles, how come 80% didn't want to come out? They weren't believers? No, they were believers. You see miracles like that, you cannot not be a believer. You're going to say, well, maybe some more, some less. Can't be that way. You're seeing open miracles. They say today open miracles don't change people. Yeah, it's clouded within nature. Okay. These are blatant open miracles. That is nothing to talk about. So if that is the case, what are they complaining about? Why wouldn't they want to live where they are? Right? It's a simple question. We always say the question's better than the answer. Yeah, what's the issue here? Why in the world would they want to leave? They witnessed the miracles. Very good. They witnessed the miracles. What's the problem? They know when they leave, where are they going? Says Moshe Rabbeinu, we're going to the desert. God's going to show us his place. We're going to go to the Holy Land. Right? Very good. They're being fed 3 meals a day or 2 meals a day, whatever. They're going into the unknown. Not only are they going into the unknown, they're going into the desert. And how many people can survive in a desert without food? Right? I say, well, God will provide. God says he'll provide. Okay, God has a track record. Very good. God says he's going to provide. Yeah. So what are they worried about? You have a guarantee by the one who runs the world. And even so, if these people saw open miracles, they say, nope, we don't want to go. Now, was it understandable? Understandable to a certain extent. Because they saw open miracles. But what was one of the first tests of Abraham? Lech lecha me'artzecha. Leave your land. Leave the place that you know. Leave your father's home. Now, no great shakes by his father. Idolater, other things. But he had a good thing going. Him and Sarah. Bringing a lot of people closer to Torah. Convincing the world, trying to convince the world, believe in one God, right? Everyone had their pocket God. Here's Bob. Don't leave home without him. Everyone had their pocket God. Very good. He brought the belief one God to the world. Absolute monotheism he brought to the world. God says, one of the 10 trials he has. But God promises. God says, if you listen to me, very good. You have fame, wealth, power, child, you have children. Okay, where do you sign up? Where do we sign up? Yeah, God comes to us and says, listen, I'm going to give you millions. You're going to have money more than you could ever spend. You're going to have kids, you're going to have fame, you have power. Beautiful. And God tells us, okay, go to where I'm going to show you. Can I have a hint? Maybe he's going to send him to Yukon territory. Frozen tundra. How do you know you're going to be able to do what you're going to do wherever God's going to send you? So what's the trial? You tell me God's giving you everything on a platter. Right? He's just not telling you where you're going. So every step of not knowing where you're going, even if God is telling you it's all going to be good, you're going to have power, power and fame and all that. Great. But it doesn't tell you where you're going. Am I going to be able to speak the language there? Am I going to make business there? God promises you, but you don't know where you're going. You're going to the unknown. So this Talmudic dictum, and the Talmudic dictum is there's nothing worse than beginnings. Beginnings are very hard. Right? This is not a new phenomenon. It's not something that's happened in 30s, 40s, in the 80s, whatever. It's a phenomenon you're talking thousands of years before. Rabbis already understood. Person takes on a new thing, it's hard. All beginnings are hard. So imagine you're established in a place for years. All of a sudden, you get this divine decree. Gotta go. So I'm going to give you everything to make you successful. Okay. But you're leaving everything you know. Even if it wasn't so great in other ways. Okay. And all the people that he and Sarah converted, what happened to them? You don't hear anything about them. So what's the simple explanation what happened to them? What happened to them was what happens if you don't have a leader? Or you don't put someone in power after you. What happens? Then everything you set up before goes to pot. Why does it go to pot? Because you don't have a manik. You don't have someone to advise, give direction, give inspiration. The leader's gone. And he didn't put anyone else beside you. No, or the person who took over wasn't as great, wasn't as charismatic. And what happened? Everyone else disappeared after that. The leader's gone, finished. That's what happens. But he's given a golden opportunity. I mean, he doesn't have a choice. He's given a golden opportunity. So what's the test? The test is he doesn't know where he's going. The test is all his success up until now. Am I going to be able to do it there or not? And he has no idea where he's going. Every step along the way, he gets merit for. So the same thing in Egypt. The Jews saw the miracle. And they understood God's going to take care of their needs. Why don't they want to leave? Because all they know when they leave, all they know is dust and sand. That's all they see. They're in a desert. No oasis, no nothing. Isn't God going to take care of all their needs? They're afraid. And maybe rightfully so. How are we going to live in the desert? Moshe, what are you going to do? What are the cattle going to eat? We got nothing. We're never going to be able to survive. And that's what they complain. They get to Yam Suf. They get to the sea. What do they see? Water all around them. And then what do they see behind them? The Egyptians coming. They complain. Nachshon jumps in, nothing happens. Yeah, Nachshon ben Aminadab. Water gets up to his head just about, and then the sea splits. But even at that point, they complain. These are the ones that came out because they're going into the unknown here. They say, okay, God's going to take us out. Very good. Let's go. Everyone's going to run. You're going to eat the matzah. Good. Everyone goes. And now they're up against the water. Now, weren't there some say, yeah, God's going to split the sea and this and that? Okay, God needed someone to jump in. Right? And then the sea split. Okay. But at that point, what are people thinking? How are we going to cross? You're talking 2.5, 3 million people. You're not talking a few people over here. No boats. No way to make boats. They wouldn't probably know how to make boats anyway. Most likely. No wood. In either case. They get to the sea. And they're like, what, you brought us out here to die? We got nowhere to live. And not only that, the Egyptians are straight on their tail. They see the Egyptians are coming. So what in the world's going on over here? God promises you're going to come to the land. You're going to accept my Torah. You're going to come to the mountain. Well, God, we got a problem here. All I see is water. And behind us, we see the Egyptians coming after us, bring us back. So what was the whole point of leaving? Seemingly made no sense. Nachshon jumps in. The sea splits. What was God doing over here? Take it one step further. Let's go back. What's the last thing the Jewish people have to do before they get out of Egypt? The last thing. They have to slaughter a sheep, and they have to take the blood and put it on the doorpost. Now, the sheep, or the news they call the Shepsala, the sheep itself was an Egyptian god. Moshe Rabbeinu tells them, God told me you got to kill the sheep in front of the Egyptians. You have to kill their god. And you have to take the blood and put it on the doorpost. Because then, God will know who's following him or not, then you'll survive and go out. So they come up to Moshe Rabbeinu and say, Mo, what's going to be here? How in the world can we slaughter their God in front of their face? And they not do anything. What does Moshe Rabbeinu answer? The divine command. This is what God told me. Right? This is what God told me. This is what you got to do. You got no choice. This is what you got to do. Very good. That'd be equivalent today. Go to Egypt, take a cow, and slaughter in front of all the Hindus. Right? In front of all those that worship cows. Go ahead. Right? I wouldn't try this at home. Do something like that. Knowing that that's, they look at as a god. And you slaughter it in front of them, those that worship it. Do it in front of Muslims, even better. Yeah? Slaughter a pig in front of them. Go smear it on their mosque. Yeah, see what happens. It's suicide. Essentially. But Moshe Rabbeinu says, listen, if you don't do this is what God's telling me. If you don't do this, guess what's going to happen? You ain't getting out of Egypt. Now, there are 10 plagues. Right? The last plague has not come yet. Talking about the plague of killing the firstborn. Moshe Rabbeinu says this is the last step. They've seen all the miracles. And they look at Moshe Rabbeinu and say, really? This is what we have to do? Moshe Rabbeinu says, yeah. That's what God told me to tell you. It's like, come on, this is a joke? Where are the mirrors? Where are the cameras? Like, come on. Look what's gone on up until this point. What does God want to see? God's still squeezing them for their belief in Him. And God is squeezing them for Messiah's nefesh. Self-sacrifice. Now, there's an age-old question. The plagues themselves. Who were the plagues for? Were they for the Egyptians or for the Jews? Right? What would a good rabbi say? Both. Why both? Because the Torah says, God's going to show His might among all the nations. He's going to show what He's going to do to Egypt, and everyone will be afraid of Him. So you say it's for the Egyptians. Very good. It's for them and the rest of the world to know God is God. But it also says that the Jewish people will know that I'm their God. Only to serve me. So essentially it's for both. To a certain, to a great extent. It's for the world to see who's God, for the Egyptians to see His power, and for the Jews to have faith that He's their God. And He's taking care of their needs. So if that's the case, why this test? Why make them go through this? They've already seen, they've experienced, right? So what does God do? Well, again, one explanation. What does God do? God is going to show them beyond the shadow of a doubt. Who's the one in charge? It's going to strengthen their faith and belief in Him. Very good. But they're going to need that faith and strength in order to go in the desert. Because if they have any doubts whatsoever, how are they going to have faith to say that God's going to take care of their need? Right? And not only that, you see the failure, okay, it was a mixed multitude, it was the error of the converts that came out, from Egypt or from other places, difference of opinion, where these converts came from. Regardless, they're the ones that made the golden calf. Now, it's even a harder question. After everything the Jewish people have gone through, came out of Egypt, saw God face to face on Mount Sinai, whatever it is, short time thereafter, even though the Torah is out of order, right? Rashi says many times, "Ein mukta muchar b'Torah." Torah is not written in chronological order. So you'll see after the giving of the Torah, after Parshas Israel, you get a number of chapters before you get to the story of the sin of the golden calf. That's out of order, right? Moshe Rabbeinu does not write everything in order the way it happened. Yeah. So, it happened sometime, it happened a short time after the giving of the Torah. So now you can ask even stronger question. If the Jewish people got the Torah, they died, they came back to the bodies, whatever that means. First the 10 Commandments, all the 10 Commandments, whatever it may be. They come back to the bodies. They have this unbelievable experience. Unbelievable spiritual experience. Did anyone in their right mind think that when they came out, that this calf is the one that took them out? Now the commentaries, if you look over there in the book of Exodus, commentaries go to task, and try and prove beyond the shadow of a doubt this is not idolatry. Yeah. Simple explanation of the verses, right? And, the Karaites will be happier because they don't believe in rabbinic interpretation. They'll say, of course it's idolatry. It sounds like idolatry. You read the verses, right? Any language you understand. You read those verses, what does it show? Right? What does it show? It shows idolatry. That's what it sounds like. 100%, that's what it sounds like. Nothing more, nothing less. You look at the commentaries, they bend over backwards, say no. Now, why would they do that? Jewish people look bad enough, even if it's the Erev, even if it's a mixed multitude, doesn't matter. Yeah? It's inconceivable. It's incomprehensible that the Jewish people at that level, the highest level that Jewish people have ever been in, I mean, okay, they weren't, let's say better, the world has been in since the sin of Adam and Eve. That's how great divine revelation was. But the evil inclination knew. If this is the case, everyone's getting inspired, the Messiah is going to come, he's out of a job. He's out of a job. Yeah, so what does he do? So the Medrash says, constructs the coffin, shows people in heaven a coffin of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu went up and he died. Now they made a mistake when he's coming back. So Aaron Cohen, tries to push them off, takes the jewelry from the women, which never thought they would give, and whatever, they end up making this golden calf. So you tell me it's only the mixed multitude, they're the ones that got killed, whatever. Okay. But what's the obvious question? What is the obvious question? The obvious question is, they just got the Torah. They saw God face to face at Mount Sinai, the unbelievable experience they went through. You want to tell me, a short time thereafter, all of a sudden, they think this calf that talks and eats and this and that took them out of Egypt? Impossible. According to logic. Forget about any explanation. According to logic, that would make no sense at all. No sense at all. But if you read the verses, what are you going to tell me? It's idolatry. Clearly idolatry. So then you say, well, the commentaries do not want to make the Jewish people look so bad. So what do? So they reinvent the wheel, and they say, no, it means like this, and it means like that, and whatever. It means a lot of different things, but it can't mean simple explanation. Now, if you look at almost any other so-called religion, any other so-called book, they talk about their saviors and this and that. They're not flawed, or very little flawed, if anything. This looks really bad, right? This looks pretty bad. Here you're going to tell me the story. God took them out of Egypt and destroyed Egypt, the world power, this, that. And then that's how they serve God, by serving idols straight after they get the Torah. Don't make any sense. Logically, it makes no sense. Again, even if you're going to tell me it was a mixed multitude, it was only a few thousand, it wasn't the rest of the Jewish people, okay, they shouldn't have accepted the converts there anyway, blah, blah, blah. Very good. That's all true. Except for one thing. They still did it. They still did it, and the repercussions were so bad. Yeah, the world went back to where it was, the evil inclination won. Messiah could have come at that point. Brought the Jewish people straight into the land, no problem. But it can't be, the commentaries say. And there's a lot of things in the Torah like this, especially in the book of Genesis. You cannot look at the Torah itself at face value. If you look at it at face value, you're a fool. And the reason I'm going to use such strong language is because you're going to look at it like a 5-year-old looks at it. Oh, come on, you really think? This happened, that, whatever. You look at the story of Lot and his daughters. Well, who comes out of Lot and his daughters? Ruth, daughter of the king of Moab. Right? Moab, from my father. Okay. One of his daughters wasn't, necessarily so modest. Very good. Moab. Who comes from Ruth? King David. Now think logically. King David himself. The harbinger of the coming of the Messiah. You have to be from the Davidic line, even according to Christians. You got to be part of the Davidic line for the Messiah to come. Very good. You want to tell me King David came from an incestuous relationship? That's where the Messiah comes from? Doesn't look so good. Right? A lot of these stories don't look good. Kingship comes from the tribe of Yehuda. Right? Torah says at the end of the book of Genesis. Right? scepter never leave the tribe of Yehuda. That's where kingship comes from. Very, very good. Where does kingship come from? Yehuda and Tamar. Forbidden relationship. She dresses up as a harlot, as a whatever. The prostitute doesn't know it's his daughter-in-law, blah, blah, blah. We know the story. That's where kingship comes from. That make any sense? Doesn't make any sense. Logically, it doesn't make sense. These are where our patriarchs are. These are where their children are. Yeah. As great as they are, hard to say what's going on. You're going to say, yeah, his wife had died. Whole thing happened with it, his kids died, whatever. He's, sharing the sheep, whatever, taking the sheep out. Guy has certain needs, whatever. Yeah, and he meets this woman. Now again, we understand all the children of Jacob are righteous. If all the children of Jacob are righteous, there are a lot of questions. Yeah. Obvious question, what happened to Dinah? I'm sorry, what happened to Joseph? Because the brothers sold Joseph and were crueler than they should have been, even though they might have had a right to do what they did. So on Tisha B'Av, we read about the Asar Haruge Malchus, 10 martyrs, 10 tremendously righteous people killed in horrific ways. There is one of those liturgical poems on Fast and Ninth of Av. Paying for the sale of Yosef by the brothers. How can they all be righteous? Look what they did. And they don't realize their mistake until the very end. Until they see things are above nature, what happens to them and how Joseph speaks to them and all that, they realize they made a mistake. But how could they be up until that point they didn't realize? It's an obvious question. They throw him into a pit of scorpions. Right? Mime, a pit, Shane Bo Mime. Doesn't have water. So Raj says, what do you mean it doesn't have water? What's in that pit? Snakes, scorpions. Right? As the Gemara says. They said, okay, if he's a prophet and what he's saying is true, he won't die. Yeah, but he's very young. And he's screaming out. And they sat and they ate. But didn't they have a right to do what they did? According to Torah, they had a right. They had a right. Yeah, at some level, very hard to understand. At some level, there's cruelty here. There's a certain level of cruelty. But, again, if they did what they were supposed to do, and here you have Joseph, tattletaling on them and telling their father different things and blah, 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 making them look bad, they claim that what? He's a rodef. What's the status of a rodef, a pursuer? You kill him. You kill the pursuer. That's the status. Right? If a woman is in childbirth and the child is killing the mother, you kill the child. I had someone many years ago before, I certainly got involved with, with converts and all that. Someone asked me this question. Non-Jew asked me this question. Said, why is it, according to us, if the mother is giving birth and the child potentially is killing the mother, why is it you kill the mother? You let the mother die, you save the child. By us, it's the opposite. Yeah, you save the mother, you kill the child. Why? Because the child is a pursuer. The child's the one that's causing the danger here. So you kill the child. But what's the difference? It's a huge difference in world outlook. You know what the difference is? The difference is between potential right now and future potential. Right? So according to Christians, who do they go according to? Future potential. Yeah? The mother, however old, doesn't really matter. That child is going to live longer than the mother, usually. So if the mother dies, you save the child. According to Judaism, total opposite. You go according to what you know right now, to what you have right now. What do you have right now? You have the mother. And she's a viable entity. Yeah. So you save the mother and you kill the child because the child is causing the mother to die. So you go after potential right now, not future potential. And we know this from Yom Kippur, from Rosh Hashanah. We know that a person is judged on their actions right now. And of all people, who do we learn it out from? Yishmael. Yeah, because the Torah there says, at the end of the verse, it says, Basher Husham, where he is now. That's not future potential. That's potential right now. Because the angels say, kill him. Look at what all his prodigy going to do at the end of days. Going to cause the Jewish people a lot of pain and suffering. God says, you're right. I'd love to kill him. I only have one problem. Right? They say, what's the problem? It says, is he guilty? It says, a child. Is the child guilty? Not guilty. Why is he not guilty? He's underage. Can't kill him. Get away till he's of age. When he's underage, can't kill him. Forbidden. Basher Husham. That's what you learn out by Yishmael. And that's how God shuts up the angels. But they have a claim. Look what he's going to do in the future. Right? Give another example. What does the Medrash say? The Medrash says Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to save one of the children in Egypt, a baby that was being used as mortar in a wall. God says, bad idea. Don't do it. Moshe Rabbeinu felt compassion for this child, saves the child. Went against what God said. The Medrash says, who's that child? Who did that child become? Achav. Evil King Achav. Right? What's the point of all this? I want to get lost in all my parables here. Right? What's the point? The point is what we see. We don't have a clue of what it is. You can learn all these stories, as we start in the book of Genesis. You can learn all these stories like a 5-year-old. Or you dig a little bit deeper, you see what's really going on, what's behind the scenes. Right? That's the depth of Torah. Right? You can learn the story of creation, you spend your whole life learning it because it's all Kabbalah. Right? It's all Kabbalah, trying to understand it. But the stories, the face value of the stories, very hard to understand. At a simple level. Very, very hard to understand. Right? So, it's interesting. Then you get to then you get to the prophets, into what the prophets say. Also, you got to understand what they're talking about, who they're talking about, what the reference is, and what do the Christians do? They take it all out of context. Totally out of context. Yeah? But you can't look at things as face value. Looking at things at face value one day, maybe, sometime in the future, I'll go through Tanakh, step by step. Because there's so much depth. I've been learning this for years. And so in Isaiah chapter 19, should finish it hopefully this week. Yeah. Tremendously in depth of what's going on and what's behind the scenes. Kids learn it when they're younger. They learn about the stories. That's about it. I mean, it's unfortunate, but that's about it. Yeah. And then when they're learning Talmud, they're learning Gemara, they'll say, this means like this, and this means like that. They'll quote verses from Tanakh they don't remember. So you got to look them up. And usually, when I'm learning whatever the Torah quotes, I look up, usually. Right? I usually look it up. Usually look it up with the Torah Tamima. Torah Tamima, one of the great rabbis of the last generation, 100 years ago, that goes through all the Gemaras, all the Midrashim, what it's talking about. Yeah. So I always see, okay, how's he going to learn this Gemara? What, how's he going to explain this or explain that or whatever? There are plenty of things I don't know, certainly. So, you look it up, you look at it differently. You thoroughly look at it differently. Chumash you got to learn. But you can't learn it at face value. Right? And that's why some say a person shouldn't learn Tanakh unless they learn from someone who knows what they're doing, because you need a lot of fear of heaven, because there are verses in Tanakh that seem to contradict the Torah. And that can't be. Because in the book of Deuteronomy, what's the Torah tell me? You can't add and subtract the Torah. You cannot go against Moshe Rabbeinu. God says, my trusted servant, whatever he says is good, it's gold. So how do you have, potentially, you have prophets that may contradict him, or it sounds like they're contradicting him. Now that can't be. That's an impossibility. Goes against the entire structure of the Torah, right? So, if you look at Jeremiah chapter 30, right, where Jeremiah talks about a new covenant, we'll call the Brit Chadashah. Yeah, the new covenant. Now, by definition, there's no such thing. Because you can't go against the prophecy of Moses. How can they call it a new covenant? Right? How can they say we're not chosen anymore and whatever? Now, it's a good question. There is a legitimate question here. Why does it say a new covenant? Good question. But it can't mean it's totally new and the old covenant goes out the window. It can't mean that. How do I know? Internal logic. What does internal logic tell me? You can't add or subtract to the Torah. That's what it tells me. Cannot add or subtract to the Torah. If I can't add or subtract to the Torah, how can something be new? How can the Torah be new? Can't. If you look at the beginning of the chapter, what's Jeremiah saying? He's chastising the Jewish people to keep the Old Testament, keep what was said before. Yeah, quote unquote Old Testament. Keep the original covenant. So why is it called a new covenant? Good question. But it cannot be logically. That's not what it means. Cannot mean that. Right? So again, that'll be, quote unquote, a proof of the Christian. See, you're not chosen anymore. But what do you see in the Torah that's the case? Is it reward and punishment? We may be thrown out of the land, right? But a Jew's a Jew no matter what. Let's say intermarry, yeah? Or do other things. But a Jew's a Jew. And only a remnant of the Jewish people will survive. Okay. But with all that, there's logic here. I can't go against basic things. So I can say, but that's what it means. How can it mean that? Now, they have their own convoluted way of looking at it, which they take all these things out of context. Right? But the point is, again, I think the Karaites will praise me over here because, they hate rabbinic interpretation. This is internal logic. This makes perfect sense. It cannot mean what they say it means. Yeah? For that simple reason. Now, they'll have their reason. They'll have their own convoluted way of looking at it and say, oh, it means this. They'll go to Webster's fifth definition or eighth definition or whatever. And they'll come and explain it in, I don't know, however many different ways. They'll explain it. Okay. But how do you go away from the simple explanation? The internal logic. Right? So you go through these things, and the point of all this is when it says they hated the land, the women that saved them, whatever, but if they hated the land, they didn't want to go there, how can that be? From where they came from. How could 80% of the people that were there not want to get out after seeing all the miracles? Now, you can answer simply, the miracles didn't affect them. Ramosha Feinstein, the blessed memory, Darash Moshe and Parashas Korach, says Korach missed that point. How can he come against Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron? Really, it's against Aaron. He wanted to be the high priest. He felt he had the credentials to be the high priest. Moshe Rabbeinu showed favoritism to his brother. Yeah. He showed him favoritism. So comes along Korach. He wouldn't have come against Moshe Rabbeinu because Moshe Rabbeinu was considered the king. Right? If he would have come out against the king, they would have killed him. So he came out against Aaron and Cohen. Jealousy killed him. Essentially, jealousy killed him. Right? So ask Moshe Rabbeinu. He saw the miracles. Yeah, in Egypt. He came out of Egypt. He saw the miracles of Mount Sinai. He held the ark and he didn't die. He wasn't a fool by any stretch. Jealousy destroyed him. Okay. But it's an unbelievable thing. That also doesn't make sense. Logically. You see all those miracles? So says Moshe Rabbeinu, you know what? The miracles didn't affect him. He didn't internalize the miracle. And then to the evil inclination and jealousy killed him. You talk about Bilam, the evil prophet, and getting to curse the Jewish people, right? And all that. He had a certain level of prophecy. Some say on the level of Moshe Rabbeinu in different ways. Right? He could figure out in a split second God's anger and do certain things in order that Jewish people be in danger. And God spoke to him. He had prophecy. And what happened? You're gonna watch my video on YouTube on Parshas Balak, right? I said that prophecy doesn't make you righteous. It's a mind-boggling thing. Someone came to the Brisker. I mentioned this before. Someone came to Rav Yisrael Zev Soloveitchik, a blessed memory. Yeah, and someone from America came and said, if God would show more open miracles, people would come closer to Torah. And he said, I disagree. Why did the Brisker disagree? Brisker disagreed for one very simple reason. He said, if you see a miracle, you have to be a vessel, you have to be a kli. Because if you're holding somewhere in the world, that can affect you. If you're holding nowhere in the world, it won't affect you, even if God does an open miracle. Yeah, the Vilna Gaon once said, you could have someone in my room, and I could say certain, ineffable names of God. I could bring the entire constellation into this room. And you have people still trying to figure out how I did it with mirrors and trickery and this and that. Right? So the Vilna Gaon said like this, in the time of Shimon HaTzadik, yeah, Aristotle was around at that time. Other people around at that time. If they weren't misspelled from him, from his righteousness, if that righteousness didn't have an influence on them, if I would bring all the heavenly constellations in this room, right, they'd also try and figure out how I did it. Also wouldn't affect them. Why? Because they can only understand what they see. That is Greek philosophy. They don't believe in the supernatural. They don't believe in something, let's say better. They don't believe in something that's beyond their capacity to understand. They only understand what's in front of their face. That's a major lack. You can say, you believe in a leap of faith. Well, it's not a leap of faith. We believe through knowledge, right? Internal knowledge, internal logic. Things that make sense, but through knowledge. Leap of faith is for the Christians, right? And you got to remember, any of these other so-called religions, they all start out the same. They all start out the same. Yeah. Someone had a vision. Someone did this or did that in front of one person, few people, whatever. And that was it. It's not verifiable. There's no way to verify it. Muhammad's flight from Mecca to Medina. How many people were there? Few? 10? 3? What are the miracles JC did? Who did he do in front of? Thousands? Hundreds? Few people? Why is the story of the book of Exodus never been replicated in Parshas Yisro? Right? The story of divine revelation. No other so-called religion, and it'll never happen in the history of man. No one is ever going to do such a thing. They're never going to mention such a thing. Because how do you fool an entire nation? They did it in front of a few people. Who was there? Nobody. How can it be verified? Got to have a leap of faith. Right? For certainly have to have a leap of faith. By us, it's passed down generation to generation. Now, people could argue. And people could ask, how do we know it's the same Torah? Right? Why do we have all these rabbinical laws? Good, that's a different question. That's a different question. But if you're going to start with the source, you start with the Torah itself. And the reason you're going to start with the Torah itself, because it's the only religion, quote unquote, not really a religion, right? But it's the only religion, quote unquote, that makes a claim in front of an entire nation. Now, if somebody wasn't there, they say, I didn't hear that. Say, yeah, but grandpa was there. Great-grandpa was there. And they pass it down generation to generation. Right? So how do we know it's the same Torah? Okay, that's a different question. That's a totally different question. But the point of all this is what I'm looking at And what I'm understanding, I can look at it as a 5-year-old. I can look at it as a 10-year-old. Maybe it's no different than a 5-year-old. But what I see at face value, I have to dig. And I have to, I have to dig kind of deep to understand here. Right? I'm not talking about, different halachas and what, when you have to wash your hands, when you have to do this, you have to do that. Talking these type of things, these more esoteric type of things. Because these things you look at it and say, doesn't make any sense. Or, as I would say when I was in college and university, a lot of sense it doesn't make. Right? It doesn't make sense. These things we mentioned don't make any sense. Right? They want to go back to Egypt. That make any sense? The spies, their complaints. Their complaints were like grasshoppers in their eyes. Yeah, that make any sense? Doesn't make sense. Logically, doesn't make sense. According to the fact that they don't want to leave, that they don't want to leave Egypt, right? Really? If you look at it at face value, it also doesn't make sense. We tried to make sense out of it, going to the desert, they don't know what's going to be, and how they're going to eat, whatever. Okay. But logically, it's like, okay, we're going to stay in Auschwitz. Really? You're going to stay in Auschwitz? That's the place you want to go back to? Yeah, we had, a couple meals there every day. We had fish. We had watermelon. Ah, that watermelon. I can just taste it now. Miss the watermelon. You remember getting beaten down to like the inch of your life on a daily basis? Don't you remember all the things you went through? Don't you remember all the hardship? Well, what am I going into? That's the point. Where am I going? I'm going into an abyss. I'm going into a desert. I remember when I went to Egypt many, many years ago. Right? I'm on a bus and you see 300 kilometers, 240 miles to Cairo. What do you see around you? Dust, sand. I'm like, okay, 150 miles. Yeah, 250 go on, whatever it is. Yeah, very good. What do you see? Same thing. Finally, you get closer, you start to see civilization. You start to see roads, like real roads. No traffic lights, right? Imagine going through a 4-corner intersection blind. No traffic lights, kind of dangerous. Yeah. But nonetheless, then you see a city. But for hours, you see nothing. All you see is desert. All you see is dust, sand. Right? So now, looking backwards, can we really have a claim against them? That they didn't have, quote unquote, enough emunah? And they're going out into the middle of a desert. You're not going to last 2-3 days without rations in the desert. Forget about wild animals, other things, right? Food. You'll die there. 100% you'll die there. But on the flip side, look at all the miracles that happened to them. And God said himself, he'll take care of their needs. So I'll take it one step further, go back in time. Yaakov Avinu. What does God tell him? God says, I'll take care of you. Give you bread, give you water, I'll take care of your needs. Yaakov Avinu asked him a second time. Yeah, if I playing God, put on my funny George Burns glasses, I'm like, what are you, hard of hearing? You didn't hear what I said? I told you. I will take care of your needs. You have bread, you'll never have want. Your needs will be taken care of. Why does he ask him a second time? Right? The commentary say very simple. What was his question? His question was, I don't doubt you're going to take care of my needs. But what if, God forbid, I do something that may cause me to sin, right? Maybe I'll do something, I'll sin, and I won't have that divine promise. Yeah, that divine promise now will never happen. And what's going to happen? I'm in trouble. I'm going to be in trouble. Right? So we could say like this, that what were they lacking? They were lacking at some level. the idea that if they do something wrong and if they sin, they don't have the same divine protection. Now, if you don't have that same divine protection, right, what essentially is going to happen to you? What's going to happen to you is you're going to be subjected to nature. And when you're subjected to nature in such a case, we'll say it's kind of extreme because you're in the desert, right? You're in an extreme case. You have no divine protection. What's going to happen? What most likely is going to happen? You are subject to the elements. And what will the elements do in such a case? You'll die. You will not survive. It'll be, maybe you'll survive a little bit, but you won't survive very long, right? Even a person, is a great survivalist and this and that. How long is the person going to survive in such a case? Right? Yeah, we're going to find water. You need water. Yeah, I ain't going to get water. Yeah, food you can live with without, for a number of days without. Water, you can't. Right? A couple of days without water, that's it. Yeah. So at some level, this whole thing is you have to say some level of lack of faith and belief in God. Some level. But they themselves felt what? They felt if we don't uphold our end of the bargain and we do something, then God's going to say, okay, you didn't listen to what I said. Because you didn't listen to what I said, you're going to be left to the elements. That's what they were afraid of. But imagine, again, God is squeezing them, working on their faith and belief in Him, and that He runs the world and all that. All they had to do was take a few more steps. They would have gone on to the land of Israel. That would have been the end of it. That would have been the end of the world as we know it. Yeah. Problem was, then you had to send the spies, right? Or you had to send the golden calf, then you had to send the spies, later. And they go around China, and that whole generation has to die out. This is a very depressing thing altogether. Right? Why? Because if this is the greatest generation in the history of man, and this is what happened to them, what's it going to say about us? So the only saving grace is the fact that why are we going to be, or our kids or our grandkids, whatever, be the generation where the Messiah comes, right? It's going to be at some point. I mean, it should be speedily in our days, but, we're very close to coming to the Messiah. I don't think there's any question, right? But if they go to bring the Messiah, what's going to be for us? So it's a simple answer, because we're walking on their foot, on their, I want to say on their toes, we're not walking on their toes, on their, what the expression is, whatever. We're using their merit. All their merit has got us to this point. Right? Now, what's the single biggest thing that we have to fight through today? Yeah. What's this generation, what do we have to fight through the most? Faith and belief in God. Why? Because we see, and we're going to see, in the future, we have no one else to turn to but Him. And everything doesn't make any sense. There's a lot of things in the world upside down, totally upside down. Right? So many things go against Torah. So many things. So I always say, for a person to be religious, and today, and still keep what they need to keep, at a respectable level, it's very hard. Why? A lot of tests. That's this is going to be the test. It's going to be the test of how we see that God runs the world, and we're going to keep the faith or not. That's the test. That's the ultimate test. It's not an easy test. Each generation has their own test. Okay. But we're going on the coattails. That's the word I was thinking of. We're going on the coattails of great people much greater than us. They did all the hard work. All the hard work. We also have to work hard. Compared to them, okay, our level is much lower. Very good. Much lower. Even if that's true. Even if that is 100% true. Doesn't matter. We have that ability to be the generation to come in the Messiah. Why? Because they did all the work. But we have to hold on. It's like It's like being on a boat in a storm. You're holding on for dear life. That's what it's like. That's what it's going to be like. And, God forbid it should get worse. But that's what we have to do. We have no other, no one else to believe in. Can't believe in man. No stock in man whatsoever. Learned that out from World War II. Right? Can't rely on the U.S. Can't rely on anybody. Yeah, I can only rely on Vinu Shabbat Shemayim. Right? Our Father in heaven. The only one you can rely on. Everyone else you can't rely on. People are fickle. People will change. People will sell you down the road because political reasons, for other reasons. Yeah. So we have to believe. God knows what he's doing. And God runs the world. Right? At the end of the day, we just read, Bereshis bara Elokim ez hashamayim v'ez haaretz. God created the heaven and the earth. Yeah? That means God can do whatever he wants in this world. That means if he wants to take land away from one group, give it to another group, he's got the power to do it. If he wants people to have it, they'll have it. If not, not. Right? But that's the faith and belief that we have to have, is the fact that he's the one in charge. We're not in charge. We're not in charge of anything. Right? Again, the fact that Jewish people have survived up until this point, the fact that we're back in the land of Israel, all miracles. And the fact that if all these nations want to destroy us, it's only the power of Torah. I spoke about this last night, right? In Pirkei Avos. It's only the power of Torah that saved us, right? That's how we get on to this whole thing, right? It's not about the land itself. The land itself is holy, even if God's presence, we don't feel it. And we don't see it like in the time of the first temple. Okay. We do see plenty of things that are miraculous here. I don't think there's any, I don't think there's any question. But the idea is, it's not just to be in a land of Jews. The whole point of being in the land is sanctify the land, to keep what God wants us to keep, right? My Rebbe would say, I'm not worried about Iran. I'm not worried about these other people, right? These other nations. Not worried about anything. I'm worried about, or let's say better, I'm only worried about people that sin in the land. They sin outside the land is also bad. True. Sin in the land is worse. It's a lot worse. Yeah. Having one of the biggest gay lesbian plays in the world in Tel Aviv is not good. Yeah, it's definitely not good. Yeah, having those groups, Jews are doing it or whatever outside the land is also bad. I mean, it's forbidden for non-Jews also. Okay, it's also bad. But if you're doing it in the palace of the king, it's 10 times worse, right? And that's one of the reasons why did God destroy Sodom? Yeah, because they were tremendously wicked, tremendously evil. Okay, I get it. But say some of the commentators, because Sodom was in God's backyard. Yeah, certain things, even in the land, he couldn't take. His mercy doesn't run forever. So certain things he couldn't take. So what did he do? He knocked them out. Now, why does he knock out other lands and this and that? Okay, God will take care of them. We're not worried about that. Yeah, but if it's in his own backyard, it's worse. So Rebbe would say, if you want, a person's going to come and live in the land of Israel, and pollute the land, stay home. Right? In other words, you want to pollute your own land, that's one thing. There'll still be payback. Don't get me wrong. There'll definitely be payback. Right? You want to come to the land and pollute the land, that's bad. That's worse. The judgment on you will be 10 times worse. 10 times worse. Yeah, let me let me see. Are there any questions? All right, do apologize for the interruption beyond my control, but I'm going to stop here. I do this every Sunday, 9 o'clock Eastern Time, 4 o'clock Israel Time. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Chaim Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com. Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There are videos, Q&As, Ethics for Our Fathers, Book of Leviticus. Anyone wants send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBICHIMCOFFMAN @gmail.com, whichever good. Get a day.